All right, today we're going to be reviewing Swing Your Sword's performance in the Gamedev.js jam for 2024. We placed 46 out of 232 entries in a game jam with 6,024 ratings. We received 40. I'm very happy with the results, and I'm very glad we got so many people leaving feedback on how the game could be improved, changed, and excitement for future updates, with our best scores being in the innovation and the theme, with our highest raw scores being in graphics. We have so many comments on this game. 28 just here. People saying that it's good, they like the mechanics, but that they could change the objective, graphics, very interesting, replay value, satisfying, great concept, fun, love the art, unusual take, but very enjoyable for its originality. I can't thank you guys enough. I really appreciate it. But one consistent feedback that we're getting is that people want more things to be able to kill. There isn't an end game. There wasn't an objective to fight over, and there wasn't any actual enemies inside of here. So this next update is going to be addressing these comments and other sorts of things. But let's take a look at what the game looks like now before it gets taken down for the new update version. So, currently, when the game runs, the tutorial wasn't sized quite properly for other people's screens. This only works on my screen. Uh, it's not scaled with screen size, so when you zoom in, it actually looks like that. So I didn't think about that. But outside of that's also going to be fixed in the next update. You start off. We added a few things before we published. That being the power system, and that also being the improved map generation and some other stuff. It's a fully playable game. You have these powers that you're going to be able to choose as you gain experience. And currently, the powers strength are going to double your offense every time you take it. Bounce gives you a huge spring back after you hit something. So if you get a good angle between two different obstacles, you get a very good springing force. And the enemies here, in a sense, rocks, trees, and otherwise, are giving lots of very big different experience values and other stuff. So you see killing that boulder gives me 20, chopping down this tree is going to give me so much I level up all the way over. I think it's also about 20 or so. And as your sword gets stronger, you get to kill more things, go further. And that's the game. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but with things being removed and killed, as soon as you start to get the ball rolling, the fun stops. So we're going to be addressing that in this new update I'd like to talk about. Because you can see, I'm clearing the map now, and there's not going to be anything left to do. That's it. It's done. So it leaves a bit of a bitter ending. There's nothing further or anything else to work with. So let me back out here and show off the map generation one more time. That if you were to run it again, then it's a completely different map every time. Different obstacles, different things to work with. Some might be so challenging you might not be able to gain enough power to keep your sword going. But whatever the case, that is the game. We did pretty decent. I'm pretty happy with the results. But let's start taking a look at addressing some of the game's core issues and problems. So, with that, I'm going to defer over to Spooky so we can talk about new sprites and design ideas for the game going forward.
Hey, this is Spooky. I'm going to be talking about all the art that I've made for this update and probably art that will be used for further updates moving forward. For this, we've been thinking of like a checkpoint system or maybe just something to pause the power meter if you need to like stop and smell the roses or just do shopping without the need to actually pause the game. And here we've just general tiling, trying to make the world more pretty and less blocky. And we're getting to try and add enemies to the game finally. I know a lot of people were hyped for that. We have a little system going on here. Right now it's yellow, but I can mix and match the colors to my will, and now it's a pink slime. And another one, I don't believe this is added yet, but we have this digging enemy. They're just a bunch of gnomes. Again, I can kind of change their hats and whatnot. Just the idea of an enemy that you can't hit until they pop out of the ground sounded a lot of fun. And I had some fun making these guys, trying to make them a bit quirky in their own way, trying to differentiate them. The slimes are a bit different, but they're generally the same. But for the gnomes, I actually had a good amount of diversity. And this was on the thumbnail of the original Game Jam, and we've been working on him since the Game Jam, but we couldn't implement him in the deadline. But I have most, if not all, of the sprites ready. Even some, he has like a slightly damaged phase where his face starts cracking. And here's a little behind the scenes on where that head is going to go. Just a little, I don't know if anyone can see it, but this is like Line Boil, if you've ever heard of it, where it's the same picture, but it's drawn just slightly different to add a bit of movement to make it feel less static. And that's pretty much where I'm at. I'm definitely excited to add. There's some more enemies that we haven't planned, and some more like gimmicks for enemies. Like we have one where like one side is heavily armored but the other isn't, so you got to focus on which side to swing it at and stuff like that, and that'll be fun to make when I get to it. But yeah, I will be moving on back to Zahavi.
All right, perfect. Our art's been coming along really well, high quality enemies, and I'm very excited to test them out with our replenishable system and adding some more challenge for the player, because as you're scaling up in power, you need to be challenged by enemies that have interesting attack patterns that force you to think about where you're swinging your sword. That is the general design, is that I don't want them to feel like the obstacles that we're just mindlessly breaking, but rather I want them to force you to reposition and to think about what the best angle you can get off of these enemies are. So without further ado, let's show off some gameplay. The first most notable change would be the replenishables, the growth rate and other such things, which basically means after you kill this grass, it's going to grow back after a set timer. Currently, the base timer is about 8 seconds, so it'll come back stronger with a different health bar to indicate that it's stronger, slightly more experience and other things. And here come in some slimes at different angles and things. Without any upgrades, it's a little hard to get going killing them, so it might be better to back off or to try to group them up for bigger kills or other things. So, with that in mind, our slides also have a unique property that when you kill them, as much as you might try to kite them all in the same direction, like you're playing a game of COD Zombies, they actually go off in different directions when they split. So this makes it very difficult to just stay in one place and deal with them accordingly. It can get very hectic very quickly, so you have to actually manage that. I will say, I think I might change spawn rates a bit, but for right now, because this is a bit overtuned. Currently, the spawners are set to randomly be set up in the world, so you could get fewer or more, but I think I'm just going to have them be static for now. I just wanted to show off the ability to choose where they're being generated. It gets very ridiculous, and if I get hit once, all the momentum on my sword stops, and I'm losing a huge chunk of my power. So with that in mind, resources growing back and actual enemies to challenge you that you're going to have to consider with an interesting attack pattern. All of that is going to be... Okay, I can't stop myself from having a little bit of fun with this. I'm getting off track. But the next thing I'm going to discuss outside of this enemy is the day-night cycle. The day-night cycle is actually going to change the spawn rates of enemies. So in the beginning, all the spawners spawn something, just to give you some basic low-level enemies. But as the game goes on and more enemies get spawned, there is going to be a leveling system for spawners. So even though slimes do permanently die, they are going to get stronger every time they do get spawned. So as the day goes on, the lighting changes, things are going to get more oppressive, more hectic, and you're going to have a harder time trying to farm for bigger resources. Another big change in terms of balancing and other things would be the actual stats of the power-ups and the enemies, because I want a good foundation for what the power-ups would be like. There was a lot of praise for the bounce and speed power-ups, because the faster you swing your sword, the more damage you deal. And the bounce power-up increased the actual bounce physics factor from a 1 on the sword to a 2.5, which meant as soon as you got in between two obstacles, you instantly built up more speed than the physics engine could handle. So I did have to tune down bounce a bit. It's still very valuable, because after getting a couple of them, you'll still be over 1 in terms of bounce coefficients, so that means you'll be able to build up a theoretically infinite momentum if you have enough to work with. And I've also changed speed a bit by making your starting speed a bit quicker, but making the speed power up a little bit less potent on how much extra maximum speed you can get off of it. The acceleration is still there, though, so going from nothing to something is still going to be pretty quick. Another gameplay change I heard about was that it feels a bit awkward to use space to constantly switch directions throughout the game. So instead, whenever your sword hits something, there's a small cooldown on which, after hitting something, it will consider changing directions on its own. So it'll make bouncing a lot easier, amongst other things. So, the next thing up is the music, which I did play in the beginning as this was going. I don't think I'm going to launch it with the full game, because it doesn't quite fit what I would want to go for, but let me know what you guys think and what direction I could go with. I'm using Ableton Live 10, so with just the bass instruments, I'm not sure what sound fonts or packs I should be going for to fit this game's theme, whether it should be more like Castle Crashers, like get some orchestra in there and some rock instruments, or otherwise. But until then, another feature is the sound compression, where if you hit a piece of grass, for example, it'll play at full volume, but if you hit several in a row, it's going to play at progressively less volume. So that ends up getting very quiet, actually, but it's just another detail to make it less hectic on the ears. And other features... That's the enemy class and the hazard class, respectively. Enemies and the damage associated with them. But they also do have a generic script I do want to show off. I can stop running the stipulation if you want to actually look at. Hold on, let me click off of this so it doesn't play again. There we go. So, in the actual scripting for the games, we have added significantly more information to consider. So on a single enemy, I just want to show this off on our slime, is that an enemy has their animations split up accordingly into the color, the detail, and the line work, with an animator component on a parent object controlling them. And a detail I really like here is that I can use the animator controller, something I found out recently, to actually interrupt and take care of the stagger for me. So a piece of code runs when the hurt box is over and turns off the hurt box when the slime is done runging. But in addition, it actually, on being hurt, will run that same code and completely reset the cooldown for their attack. So you can stun lock a slime by doing this, actually. I quite like that. So As per usual, Unity's animation system, I like playing around with it a lot, and we have one parent object working on those three pretty cohesively. But it also controls the hitboxes and other things. So if I wanted to animate the hitbox, say an enemy squashed and stretched as they moved, I could animate, record, and literally stretch the hitbox during part of the animation, and it would do that. So not that I'm going to do that here for this enemy, but that's something that we can work with in the future, and I'm really excited for a couple of enemy designs and ideas based around that. And the actual enemy himself, the parent object that's holding all the scripts, the enemies have their base hit points, defense, a damage received multiplier, their experience, and then an amount of power they restore your sword. So that's another thing I did change around is instead of 2 power for every single obstacle in the game, trees and boulders and other such things actually provide a lot more power because they're significantly harder to kill now. And also have significantly higher experience drops to compensate for that. There is the respawn timer and then growth rates that'll apply to things every time they're killed. So there is a chance for permadeath, which is what the slimes are on. They don't respawn, but even they have some growth rates for the spawners to understand how the slime should develop and grow throughout the game as the game gets more difficult. Whether that's changing the respawn timer, HP, defense, or XP, it'll get multiplied through every time to make sure that they can snowball back the same way the player can snowball their resources and abilities onto enemies. So, with all this information every enemy has to consider, the game still runs at 60 to 100 frames per second. If you have any performance issues, please let me know because I need to tweak and optimize some things, especially with the UI canvas in particular. And I've got some ideas about using events and enumerators instead of the just relying on the full core update method. But outside of that, uh, it's a very big system, and that's why it's taken so long to make a single enemy, because I have all of these different parts I want to be able to mix and match. But now that it's here, enemies have actions that they can use. And for example, one of these actions could be you split up on death. So that is something that I don't have to reprogram for future enemies. I can put that on any killable object, or I can put it on an enemy, or I can put it on the player if I really wanted to. So that kind of flexibility is something I've been really trying to nail down, and now that I have it, making the next enemy and the next enemy and the next enemy. For as much time as it took to make this slime enemy, I'm sure I could make 2 new enemies of different patterns and AI and things like that. So, with that in mind, get ready for more enemies going forward. The only other thing that I can think of besides how actions are plugging into one another is the. Well, actually, I'd say that about encompasses everything. All right. So, I am excited for you guys to test out the new game. And now that the game can actually go until you drop with replenishable resources and things like that, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to actually get everything out of it to survive as long as you can with diminishing returns on certain resources and experience and enemies and things like that. But one thing I do want to point out before I go is that we did have a ridiculous score of 3,324 with the previous system, which during the recording of this video, that same guy has gotten a score of 4,004 on the original gameplay by spinning the sword and not killing things because you don't want to waste the excess power that you could have time you could have spent on gaining experience by just swinging the sword. I did want to keep that aspect by letting you think about saving some easy to kill obstacles to refill your power, because this is a game about destroying the map as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But that's what the permadeath chance addresses is there is some chance that they grow back and some chance that they go away, but it's a very small chance. So about 10% per obstacle you kill, with some variation on things like the boulders never coming back. So plan accordingly, save your power, address the map as it gets generated, and try to beat his high score. Do you want to say anything? He's in the call right now, actually. He's a little bonus.
Yeah, as he said, I am the current world record holder for Swing Your Sword. Very
It's
impressive. I
very
know.
impressive. I am
It's very
jealous.
impressive.
My
If
high
you
score is
know
only
anyone at Guinness,
3,100.
if you happen to know anyone at Guinness, please tell them to return my calls. I have it on good word actually. However, from the lead developer here, Zahavi, as a little bonus to all of you guys who stuck around this long in the video, Zahavi is going to continue working on the game for the rest of his life, as you know. And in the next couple of months, be prepared for the next update after this one, which will feature over 20 playable classes, 50 new enemy types, as well as monthly battle passes.
This player is also our only Patreon. It's worth noting that I'm only contractually obligated as long as he continues to fund all of these projects.
Hold on.
Millions of dollars.
This is very important.
Everything has to be funded.
Part.
We need to be able to pay people off.
In addition to all of what I already mentioned, Zahavi himself is also going to translate the game in over 800 new languages. Can you believe it? It's going to be a lot of work for
799 of them are not real languages. It's
including
not a priority.
English, British English, and get this, the Minecraft enchanting table language.
So again, those things aren't real. I need to. It sounds like no. I think we end the broadcast now. Thank you very much.